So one of the things we always like to encourage, whether you're a reenactor, a living historian, or just a historian in general, is to do primary research. Get in the National Archives, get in the state archives, wherever you are, dive deep into your unit or whatever you're interested in, because one of my favorite things about doing primary research is coming across gems like the letter that we're going to read this week on the 11th OVC. So just about a week or so ago, I had the blessing to be at the State Archives in Minnesota there in St. Paul and did some research and kind of poured over some documents of the 1st Minnesota Volunteer Infantry throughout the entire war. So the letter that we're going to read is by Colonel, or I guess Captain Capt, who ultimately was in charge of the regiment by the end of the Battle of Gettysburg. He writes a letter to the governor of the state of Minnesota, and you can tell he wanted the governor, he wants the citizens of Minnesota to really understand what the 1st Minnesota did at the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, if you want to go and take a look, kind of Wikipedia real quick, what the 1st Minnesota did, they were thrown into the battle on the 2nd day. They were involved on the 3rd day during Pickett's charge. But I'm going to let Colonel, or I guess Captain Capt, tell it best in his own words. Headquarters, 1st Regiment, Minnesota Volunteers, Battlefield, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, July 5th, 1863. His Excellency Alex Ramsey, Governor of the State of Minnesota. I have the honor herewith to transmit to Your Excellency a brief statement of the movements of this regiment since leaving Falmouth, Virginia. On Sunday evening, June 14th, we fell in and moved about 5 miles towards Stafford Courthouse. We ordered back our pickets at Sedgwick's Crossing below Falmouth at 3 o'clock of the morning of the 15th. We were withdrawn and moved again towards Stafford Courthouse, our corps forming the rear guard of the Army. We reached Aquia Creek that night about 28 miles, and on the next day marched 16 miles on the 17th. We went to Fairfax Station on the 19th to Centerville. The weather had been very hot, and the men suffered much from the hard marching. On the 20th, we were detailed to guard the back and marched in a severe rain to Gainesville, reaching that place after midnight. On the next day, we went to Thoroughfare Gap, and there we kept on picket duty until the 25th, where we took up the line of march. The regiment was shelled by the enemy at Haymarket, and 1 man was wounded, and Colonel Colville's horse was killed underneath him. We marched that night 22 miles. On the 26th, arrived at Edwards Ferry on the Potomac. We crossed in the night and bivouacked near our old camp, and on the 27th, we marched to Sugarloaf Mountain, and on the next day came near Frederick City, Maryland. On the 29th, we made a march of 31 miles to Uniontown near the Pennsylvania line, where we found the pickets of the enemy and laid over 1 day for the muster. On the 1st of July, we marched within 2 miles of this place, where we found portions of the army who had been in the battle that day. About 3 o'clock on the morning of the 2nd, we were ordered into action in the front and about the length of our line just to the left. The battle commenced at daylight and raged with fury the entire day. We were under severe artillery fire, but was not actively engaged until about 5 p.m., where we moved to support the battery of the 4th U.S. Artillery. Company F was detached from the right as skirmishers, and Company L as sharpshooters. Our troops who had advanced upon the enemy in our front and pushed him for a while, where in time was also driven back in some confusion by the enemy following their heavy force. To check this advance, we were ordered to advance, which we did, moving at the double quick down the slope of the hill right upon the rebel line. The fire that we encountered there was terrible, and although we inflicted severe punishment upon the enemy and checked his advance, it was with the loss and killed and wounded of the men who were engaged. Here, Captain Moeller of Company E and Lieutenant Farrar of Company G were killed. The captain of Company K mortally wounded, Colonel Colville, Lieutenant Colonel Adams, Major Dorvey, and Adjutant Peller, and Lieutenant Sinclair, Company B. DeMoost of Company E, DeGray of Company G, Boyd of Company F were severely wounded. Colonel Colville is shot through the shoulder and foot. Lieutenant Colonel Adams through the chest and through the leg. Fully 2/3 of the enlisted men engaged were killed or wounded here. The 3 companies not being engaged here did not suffer severely in this day's fight. The command of the regiment now devolved to Captain Nathan Messick. At daybreak the next morning, the enemy moved the battle with vigor on the right, and the left of our line with infantry, and about 10 a.m. opened on the center where we were posted a most terrible fire of artillery, which continued without intermission until 3 p.m., when heavy columns of the enemy's infantry were thrown suddenly forward against our position. They marched resolutely in the face of a withering fire and succeeded in halting their colors on one of our batteries. They held it but a moment as our regiment with others of our division rushed upon them. The colors of our regiment in the advance and retook the battery, capturing nearly the entire rebel force that remained alive. Our regiment took about 500 prisoners, several stacks of rebel colors were taken here, and Private Marshal Sherman of Company C captured the colors of the 28th Virginia Regiment. Our entire regiment, except one company, were in this fight, and our losses again were very severe. Captain Messick, gallantly leading the regiment, was killed early in the fight. Captain Farrell was mortally wounded and died that night. Lieutenant Mason of Company D received 3 severe wounds, and Lieutenant Harmon of Company G. Another one from Company D and May from Company B were also wounded. The enemy suffered terribly here and is now retreating. Our loss of so many brave men is heartbreaking and will carry mourning into all parts of the state of Minnesota. But they had fallen in a holy cause, and their memory will soon not perish. Our loss is 5 officers killed, 12 wounded, 45 enlisted men were killed, and 160 wounded and 1 missing. A total of 222 out of the 330 men and officers engaged. A large portion of the wounds are severe, and many of the wounded will also die. I send herewith a list of the killed and wounded. Several acts of heroic daring occurred in this battle. The bravery of Colonel Colville and Lieutenant Colonel Adams in the fight of Thursday was gallant. Heroically carrying on the attack, they fell nearly at the same moment, their wounds completely disabling them. They fell so far in the advance that much time had elapsed before they were got off the field. Major Donovan received 2 bullets through the arm before he turned over the command to Captain Messick. 3 of the color guards successfully bearing the flag were wounded on the Thursday's fight. On Friday, Corporal Dinish of Company A, the last color guard, were close upon the enemy, was shot through the hand and the flagstaff cut in 2. Corporal Henry O'Brien of Company E instantly seized the flag by the remnant of the staff and, waving it over his head, rushed up to the muzzles of the enemy's muskets. At that moment of victory, he too was wounded, and the flag was instantly taken up by Corporal Irvine of Company D, who still carries its tattered remains today. Company L's Captain Berger supplied Kirby's battery throughout the battle and did very effective service there. Every man in this regiment did his whole duty. Respectively, your obedient servant, H.C. Coates, Commander, 1st Regiment, Minnesota Volunteers. So there you go. What better way of describing what the men did than the captain or the colonel himself in charge of the 1st Minnesota Regiment. Like I said, this is one of those letters that just, it kind of speaks to you, or spoke to me about what his men did, what they fought. It was a first-hand account. And so I want to kind of encourage everyone out there, do primary research, get out there, do what you need to do, get into your national archives, get into the state archives or your local museums, and do some primary research. Thank you for watching 11th OVC. We appreciate it. Please like us on Facebook. Please like us on YouTube. Subscribe to us. Ring the bell. Otherwise, until we see you on the field next time, ride hard.